The Lunar Guardsman. By Krimmer. Hell is where the heartache is. Poster's note. If you see ads on this video, it is from the website. I have not monetized this channel. And remember, if you like this video, go to the links and give the writer a upvote and the view count. End poster's note. Rarity. Just to be crystal clear, darling. When you say that I am now in command, you mean I am now to tell you what to do and you will do it. And you think that will be better? Rarity incredulously asked. It has to be, Rigdan shrugged. But you have done marvelous so far. Rarity bit her lip as she recalled Rigdan had two of the full nappers watching kids while she and her knight in blood-stained armor frolicked away into the peaceful, luscious resort that was the ever-free bucking forest. Do excuse the sarcasm. But honestly, what idiocy was running through his mind once more? You have been a hero right out of a novel today, Rigdan, Rarity said with marvel that was honest to the extreme. If you worry there is an issue with how savagely you went about freeing us, you'll find no naysaying from me. Dare I say, you've been quite tame. I have to confess, if it was some pony else that had been taken in my place, Fluttershy for instance, I would very much demand their bloodlines be expunged from the face of the earth. Rigdan seemed to hold himself quite awkwardly. The poor lad rarely had been praised as such, Rarity knew, especially for unleashing the side of him that was so unwelcome most of the time. That can still be arranged, you know, he finally said. Pardon? So, he started explaining at her momentarily dumbstruck face, this place will be up to our asses with timber wolves in a couple hours, all right? You can hear them. They're just testing out the waters now, but anyway, and you know how I told you that I made sure they won't get near your campfire because I put measures around. She nodded, very slowly and very carefully. Rigdan paused for a beat. And you know how I have them sitting way over there in another campfire? The one where I did not put measures around. She turned her head. She knew there were the four of them in total, with half lying down with severe injuries, so far that it was almost like figurines surrounding a little candlelight. The other two were currently at their own campfire, just a few meters from them. The large man did an admirable impression of Sweetie Belle with how he tapped his fingers together before raising his armored head at Rarity. So sheepish was he that the next sound out of his mouth had better be a bleat and not what Rarity expected it to be. Think you can make the kids fall asleep before the timber wolves get on them? Twilight Aurora Sparkle, any declarations verbal or mental of poppycock, made by me about your lamentings of Rigdan and his code of conduct throughout your life, I hereby retract them. Rigdan had for once in his life not been thinking idiotically, and shame on Eniponi for considering so. He wanted her at the helm because he feared he might pull another, boneheaded, discharge Luna early stunt. Turns out he was right. Thus it is left to the lady with the twice-applied concussion to concoct a course of action. But she digressed. The first order of business was to take stock of every pony. Kids? Generally unharmed and treated with gentle care for the most part. Being under the full napper's thumb showed Rarity that the aliens did not seem to be the actively malicious sort. This impression was further supported by Rigdan's vouch for them when the hostilities concluded. Not much, but it helped. Adults? Rarity had resisted, and thus not treated with gentle care. She was looking forward to an ice pack and a stiff drink when they returned home. Rigdan, Applejack, Fluttershy, and Luna. I'm fine. They're not that hurt either. As trustworthy as iridescent dragon fire threads not combusting mid-twirl, that assessment was. Rarity made a show of looking him up and down like she was taking his measurements at the boutique and grew disappointed by just how fat he got since last time. Holes in his thick armor, crusted blood all over among other unnameable fluids, shoulders slumped in exhaustion whenever he relaxed. Rigdan, dear, help me help you, or so help me, I will make the rest of your life a living hell as only a lady of my caliber can. There will be tea functions. Okay, so maybe the route we took to get to you fast wasn't exactly filled with warm sunshine. Applejack was befuddled from blood loss thanks to a massive gash on her hind leg, Fluttershy was grounded courtesy of one broken wing, and Luna was immobilized by a laundry list of wounds. And to top it all off, he just left them at the foot of the hellhole that put them in their sorry states. And they say chivalry is dead. Someone had to sally out and bring the rescue to them. It wasn't going to be Rigdan, like he wanted, because he was halfway onto a gurney himself and had to remain here to make sure the kids were not trifled with, truce or no truce. Though, since she was the boss of Rigdan now, and he was telling these people what to do. Asterisk. Victor. You're not saying it right, Liam insisted. I'm fucking trying. Oh, Arizuna chica luchadora, Victor replied, dodging the short alien's lunge for his legs. She was some version of Yellow or Honey under all that grime. And he assumed all this exercise was not doing her any favors, judging by the bloody bandages on her wing. You give it a shot. The sounds Liam tried to repeat came out too chopped, though Victor admitted it was better than his attempt. Liam had to give up halfway with a coughing fit before pressing on. Victor, for his part, tried again, hoping that loud repetition might clue the chicken-colored bitchy alien they were friendlies. Thank God, she got clued in. She stared at them puzzlingly, probably trying to decipher their attempts at her retarded language. Victor gave up quick enough in favor of gesticulating and speaking loudly. We. He pointed at him and Liam. Are supposed to take you all. He pretended to pick up 3 things in a row. To Victor faltered. How did you emote safety or? He put his thumbs and pointers together, making a rhombus and placing it over his hip. Your friend. We're supposed to take you to your friend. White, diamonds on her butt, sneery lip. She probably thought he was making a duck face at her. 15 minutes later they had a couple of drag sleds for the 2 unconscious, sleeping aliens. The yellow one could walk, nothing wrong with her legs as far as Victor could spot. He had enough of carrying alien bitches on his back. As Victor tied up the last couple of knots, he realized he was off a few feet of rope. He either had to redo the whole thing or be forced to bend over in half to drag the sled without throwing off its occupant. Luckily, he spotted that there was some rope tied next to some giant asshole. Getting near it triggered the yellow one. She hee-hawed at him, pushed his groin with her forehead. Hell, the crazy thing bit his ass as she tried to pull him back. Of course it was obvious that whatever was there, she considered dangerous. But unlike what horror film aficionados might think, the proper response was not to turn away from unknown danger and hope for the best. Plus, he was mighty curious. The hole was disappointing at first, but that was only because he had mistaken the deep shadow that was cut off from the moon as the bottom. The more he kept looking, the more his eyesight adjusted to the even fiercer darkness within. Something coiled and moved, far far below. A mass. Shining like metal or wet silvery fish skin. The yellow alien was terrified. Victor pulled up the rope, and cut off just as much as he needed, securing the rest. He didn't trust pulling it all the way up nor letting the remainder fall down there and aggravate that. I don't suppose you can tell me why the fuck you went through there or what is down there, chica, hey? Victor asked alongside appropriate gestures, as he threw the rope to Liam. Fuck him, he could take the one that needed fixing. Victor had done enough. He turned to the alien, and she had a stick in her mouth, using it to draw with some effort on the frosty dirt. She drew a conglomeration of different stuff. Octopi, teeth, snakes, ovals, and so on. His best guess would be the silver glints he'd seen down there, but he wasn't sure he cared to. She finished up by enclosing it all within 3 relatively straight but bumpy lines, curved at the top. As if they were all inside a pyramid. Liam, Victor called out, motioning for him to come over. The other man stared at the writing on the floor for a full minute. Fucked up shit locked in a pyramid? Liam questioned. He looked towards the menacing hole. Or not locked? Maybe. I was thinking it looks more like a mountain to me. His tone was carefully dead. I don't see how you can have a mountain underground. Liam stopped dead. No. It doesn't work that way. They don't just pop out of the ground like fucking carrots, he exclaimed angrily. Do we know that for sure? Victor questioned. So what? The girl draws a triangle and you think this means this world is due for a harvest. They have towns, villages, farms. Does it look like the people here are struggling to survive? Victor didn't reply. It wouldn't do to remind Liam that he had been the one angsting over the Reaper just before. Not that Victor thought that the soon-to-be dead fucker, if Victor could arrange it, was it. Liam was right that this place did not fulfill what they thought to be prerequisites for a harvest. They might do for an ender, though. It was too soon to tell. Victor furiously scrubbed the drawings with his boot. Let's get these bitches back, ASAP. And not a word to the boss about this. Not yet. He's got enough on his plate as it is. Asterisk. Rarity. Of course, Rarity knew that getting Princess Luna, Applejack, and Fluttershy here would do little more for them than keep them relatively safer. Rarity could provide one heck of a hearty soup in the case of a cold, her bedside manners were second to none, and she held pure superiority in the field of comforters and blankets, but there wasn't much she could do here for their actual wounds and ills. Plus, it would be remiss to refuse aid for these people any longer than Rigdan already had, as well. And honestly, the sooner they got out of here the better. It had been only a couple of days, but she'd swear she had been festering in this forsaken forest for 4 bucking years. At least. So even before sending off those 2 fine gentlemen, she had to arrange for rescue. As much as it broke her heart, she'd have to wake up Spiky so he could send a message. She'd rather not. The 2 darlings had just managed to fall asleep with a somewhat peaceful expression. At least she should prepare the message first. She needed paper. Asterisk. Alexander. Alexander sat up abruptly. He must have dozed off. Exhaustion catching up with him, that's what it was. Everyone was tired. Sensing a blackness blocking the warmth of the fire, he looked up. Someone had prodded him, he realized. Shadows played at the edges of John's metal bucket, keeping the eyes in full shadow. He nodded in satisfaction. The less he saw of that, the better. John spoke, thinking the nod was meant for him. We need something to write a message on. Do you have any paper? Paper. Perhaps John wanted to climb up a pine and hail the promised aid with a paper airplane. Where was Alexander supposed to find paper? He wasn't in the habit of writing post-its to his soldiers, nor did he carry a notebook. Oh right, he burned it a little bit ago, alongside the rest of irrelevant or confidential material. He had no paper. The gate was pounding through his eyes, making it harder to think. He blinked, bringing his hand up to his heart. No, he did have paper, didn't he? And this was... Yes, this could be to Alexander's advantage. He dug underneath his jacket. It was still there, like it always was. A small brick-shaped package, wrapped in insulating plastic. He had always meant to pass it on, but never imagined it to be like this. In his fantasies he was standing over a grave, or a pile of bleached bones. He'd lay the cargo he had ferried for so long, across an immeasurable distance, at its feet. He'd say a few words, say goodbye for good, and one of the longest chapters of his life would be over, never to haunt him again. John opened the package he was silently given. Slowly, as if it was a present meant to be savored or an IED that could go off in his face. The plastic fell on the ground, followed by the thin canvas that lay beneath. John held it in his hands, unmoving. If he breathed, he gave no notion of it. The spine crackled as its first page opened for the first time after so many years. The cover was illuminated briefly by the flames as it was flipped. It depicted a grey-wearing figure with a wizard hat, looking at a hole on the side of a hill, half the scenery dominated by a roaring river with a bridge crossing it in the back. On top, on an earthy orange background, lay the title. The Hobbit. There and back again. John shifted slightly to let the light reach the white page. He shuddered as he read the words that were there. Alexander remembered them well from when he took the well-used book out of its shelf in John's empty room, decades ago. Happy birthday. Love, Mom. For a few minutes John just stood there, his fingers hovering over the page as if trying to summon the courage to touch the words written within. He closed it suddenly, tensing as if the small paperback made a thumb reserved for hardcover encyclopedias 10 times its size. Thank you, he choked. This will work. He didn't sound happy. Alexander didn't blame him. But he didn't feel much sorry for him either. Asterisk. Rarity. Rigdan came back carrying a small book with a gaudy colorful cover that reminded Rarity of those childish adventure novels that Twilight used to read. Rarity supposed that it was to be expected, at least it explained where that habit of Twilight's had come from. Though goodness knew why Rigdan had found it necessary to carry light reading material with him out here of all places. It took him ages to tear out a page for her to use. Now with parchment in hoof, charcoal in mouth, and a longing for mouthwash in her mind, Rarity got started. Dear Princess Celestia. Help. While Rarity had the outdoorsman skill set of a tourist, unable to distinguish one tree from a tall bush, Rigdan simply needed one long look to the north before he described their position relevant to other landmarks that she couldn't spot. The certainty and detail scared away the doubt climbing out of her throat as she jotted their location down. Not wanting to scramble the diarch, Rarity schemed over her own, her friends and the Night Princess conditions. She did however list the numbers, and casualties of their captors as well and the treaty Rigdan made with them. Lastly, a request to please provide hot food and blankets for the kids. One drowsy application of dragon fire later, Rarity plopped down next to the huge biped, who was too busy taking a good whiff of his book. Rarity had to agree, paper was a superior aromatic choice to the current fragrance emanating off him. All that done, there was not much left but wait and keep the peace. As soon as the 2 hardier fellows of their abduction party returned with her friends, she planned to send them off to gather their dead if time allowed. No matter what, it wouldn't be proper to let the timber wolves claim them. She glanced up at the moonlight piercing through the naked branches. Not quite the proper lighting for a few passages, darling. What kind of book is it, by the way? Rarity gently said, feigning interest. It's mine, came the subdued reply. A smile stretched painfully across the gap of his cloth head cover. An adventure book. The hero takes one small step out of his doorstep towards adventure, and that small step leads him over and under mountains, forests, and to untold treasures in the nest of a dragon. She'd have to be deaf to miss the nostalgia in his voice as Rigdan leaned down to show her the blocky, fine print of his own indecipherable language. I had left this in my room. In my library. At home, he said longingly. Rarity faltered for a moment. This is yours? But, Rarity ventured, I thought the only possession you still had was that broken ring. He nodded eagerly, opening the book to its first page and devouring its contents with his eyes. Rarity stammered, trying to understand. The blonde man Rigdan sought for parchment actually had something so cherished on his person? This whole time? How? Why? Whatever for? Did he tell you how he came to have it? Rarity dared to ask. Only one way he could. The book closed in his lap, he turned his head to the heavens, his fingers still caressing it. They made it home. Sorrow had never sounded so embraced to Rarity's ears. For a moment she questioned why this friend had left their home, but she quickly thrashed it away. He did not matter. Did he tell you how? Rarity probed. How to go back to your home? Or news from there, your mother, anything? Rigdan shook his head. No. Just this. He tapped at the book. Cruel. Rarity's expression curdled. There was a special place in Tartarus for people like him, and now she wanted nothing more than to throw him down there herself. She shook her head free of indignation. No, there was a history there that she didn't really know about, a tale of woe she had yet to plunder its depths. Rigdan had shared much, but she knew enough about him now that it would be wiser to consider many of the breadcrumbs of his life before Equestria had been likely embellished. She would reserve judgment. "May I keep that for you?" Reddy stretched out a hoof. Upon Rigdan's confused hum, she said to him, "Princess Celestia will take a while to reach us. I believe you should use that time before to," she couldn't stop the growl, "interact with your friend." She steadied herself. It has been long enough, no. The giant among his people, she now knew, looked at the book, then at her hoof, then at the vile arsehole over yonder. His eyes stayed on the man for a beat before looking at the book again. "Yet. I guess it has." He surrendered the small tome, got to his feet, and marched onward. He paused long enough to give her thanks. She smiled somberly at his back. "Anytime, darling." Asterisk. Alexander. There was heat building up in Alexander's chest. It wasn't sickness or infection, although some would claim it was. It wasn't a welcoming warmth either. No, it was something ugly, and yet he let it fester, let every word nourish it unrestrained. Despite all his previous advice, his previous commands, to his remaining men, he failed his own standards, and he knew it. John had sat across from him, the helmet carried at his hip and laid next to him. Alexander found it easier to fix his stare at it rather than him. Did anyone else make it back? That was John's first question. He would have expected others. "What's the trick to the gates, or can you take me back with you?" Alexander had been steeling himself ready to say no to either, but luckily he didn't have to go through that mess yet. "Everyone," Alexander laconically replied. He folded his arms, eagerly waiting for the next question out of John's lips. "How?" John said and paused for a second, Alexander pulling his limbs closer to a defensive position. "Long did it take?" Tensed beyond reckoning, Alexander ripped the bandage off. "None at all. The very same gate that we left you at took us straight home." Alexander's eyes flickered up. No, John still hadn't figured out how the gates worked, how he was the anchor that brought them all down. John was wild-eyed, but then, unexpectedly, he started laughing. A big uproar that bit on the edge of manic before swallowing hysteria whole. It took long for it to subside, slowly dying in cackling giddiness. Still wheezing between ragged breaths and hiccups of laughter, John cackled, "Isn't that a slap in the face? Oh heavens, just like it was meant to." To Alexander's surprise, John would not ask the questions he had been expecting. Instead, he asked about Alexander himself. Why is he out here again? What happened to him afterward? What was the reason for taking the kids? John never approached the matter of his family. He didn't ask about his mother. Nor about his little sister. Alexander did his best to be as concise as possible. He left because he had simply returned to nothing. His own sister was dead, and his parents had to mourn a loss that Alexander could never explain to their satisfaction. They called the police on him, calling him a liar and a murderer. He left his world once more, hunted, hated, and determined to never return. It would be the best for everyone. He wandered, but not for long. At his second passage he found himself almost instantly captured, his wardens seeing through his fabrications as if they were paper. He was questioned again and again, the same questions every few hours, squeezing out the truth bit by bit. His confessions, for this was what they had become to him, on repeat, a litany that he repeated every day, until even the lies he had been telling himself had been scorched to ash. He joined his captors at the end, realizing they were no enemy, just as they made sure that neither was he. John was right about one thing. A man always needs a purpose. He tried to tell John about Nolan, who grounded him and mentored him. A friendship that became a brotherhood, one that was put into hiatus when Nolan led his team through the gate once more, an expedition that had yet to return. He walked into the known unknown as they all did, and Alexander could never know if he would return in his lifetime or ever. No more quiet drinks into the night as they kept his sister alive in stories that had already been told 100 times. No more quiet games of chess, music the only separation between them as they played game after game that neither of them gave actual thought or merit into. Another best friend lost. It was at about that point that John was obviously losing interest. Alexander instead explained why they were interested in the little dragon and that the other two were an accident. An explanation that required him to tell John about the Enders. He would, after all, have to explain his actions somehow to the authority of this place, and John would obviously be there to translate either way. "What does the Ender look like?" John asked. "Enders. Plural. They are all kinds of shapes." He started describing them, and with each description John eased back into a relaxed state. "Any of them wore armor? Or had lights on their head?" John asked. "Not to our knowledge." "Have you seen something like them then?" Alexander asked, leaning forward. "No. Just thought it would complete the set." "I haven't seen anything like any of them," John scoffed. "If you did, you'd be dead," Alexander replied. "Agree to disagree," John chuckled. The could-care-less shrug let Alexander know that John had lost all interest in the Enders. Either he didn't believe they were real or falsely thought that taking down Alexander's team so easily meant that similarly the Enders were nothing to worry about. He failed to understand that it wasn't just their capabilities that made Janice be aware of them. It was what they signified, both for the world the Enders arrived on, but also the wider reality of the gates. So Alexander reciprocated with the same questions he had been asked instead. Alexander had to endure a half-hour melange of random, disjointed stories, about the achievements of the young dragon, his sister who, if Alexander understood correctly, was not a dragon, and various others that quickly blurred together. They ranged from scholarly milestones to adventurous triumphs, from family meals to holidays and vacations. The gist was that John had, somehow, someway, found himself in the midst of people that he loved and loved him in turn, even if he never phrased it that way. It irked. And it reeked of injustice. Alexander was used to waking alone in cold sweats all too often. The screams of children in his ears, the rasping of nails on sealed wood heckling his hairs, the fading face of his sister pleading for closure. But no. Apparently, Alexander was the only one carrying the burden of sin, the leaden guilt for acts that weren't even his. Alexander was the one who threw himself to the void in hopes of repenting for his proximity in vile acts. All while John basked in unearned absolution, as he loved and was loved, as if he had done no harm. As if the dead, the hurt, and the lost and forgotten no longer mattered. John did not have that right. Not to stand here in front of him, having the fucking gall to smile, as he spoke of hopes of snowfall as to snow fight with children and friends. He didn't have that right, he tore it away, buried it in the dirt alongside the names of those he broke, Michael, Vivian, Alexander's sister, John's sister. All the fucking children just plummeting into the dark for some extra dried meat and barley that they never even needed. Alexander swallowed the fire in his chest and let it burn in his stomach. He could hear only it after a while, still roaring, despite forcing it to die until it was a mere hiss, embers ready to flare under the ashes. He sat there, gazing at the fire in front of him, his face expertly crafted to be stone. Even as Victor and Liam returned carrying more wounded, John hopped up and hovered worried over the blue alien with the hair that projected the sky above. John carried her to rest next to him, his hand reaching and pulling back constantly, his gaze returning to her and the long cracked horn on her forehead. Her hair was one of the most beautiful sights that Alexander had ever seen. Strands of cosmic ink with motes of starlight fading in and out, dancing, dazzling, weaving and orbiting. A window to an impossibly clear night sky. Alexander found he could not care for it for long. John had sent Alexander's own soldiers away to gather their dead, and still Alexander raised not a word. He had realized it was the white alien, that had been so hurt due to his own command, that was showing them such mercy and care. She did not know him, she had all the will on heaven and earth to ignore their plight, and it was she, not Alexander's own childhood friend, that spared them kindness. The fire was all there was. The thin wisps of smoke, their dance, and their ethereal grasp on his peace. His heart had been smoked dead, and nothing shook him. Not when the dragging of the dead started. Not when it finished. Not when Jacqueline came to him roaring of unimagined grace, of how Derry was found still alive. How Derry had been hit hard, and they thought him dead until moving him made him groan. Another friend who now bled with death hovering over him, but alive still. A friend almost as precious as Nolan, as close to Alexander's heart as anything could ever get nowadays. No, even that did not move him. But John's grimace at the news, the cold mist out of his lips as he sighed, the fucking disappointment in his eyes, at the news that he had misjudged, that someone he had wanted dead was not. As if Derry was a point he had failed to score and not a person, a life, a friend who had not betrayed Alexander's soul. That did the trick. That got Alexander's heart thumping hard back into life. And John noticed nothing. John uttered worries, made false proclamations that the Blue One being harmed a queen of sorts, Alexander understood was his fault. Faithless utterances, the amassing of guilt he did not believe in or cared, all to gather pity for himself. Not for the other two, fuck them apparently. Alexander doubted they mattered as people in John's mind at that moment. He had chosen one that he could think of as a real person, and he used her as a shield for his own faults. If it had not been her it would have been the dragon, Alexander bet. It was one of the things that Alexander had never realized, not until Nolan. Even as a child, this had been John. Throughout the traffic accident, this had been John. Through the gate, and this had been John. Heavens, it fucking burned. They had moved. Alexander wasn't sure when exactly, but they were closer to the fire, keeping the larger blue-horned native warm and comfortable in her sleep. John had been speaking at length about this Blue One. Selene, he called her, the ancient word for the moon. A close approximation to what her true one was, apparently, and it really was a beautiful name, fitting such a captivating individual. You could hound Alexander about what John's relationship to Selene truly was, and he'd be at a loss. John spoke of her like a lover at times, then a heart-bound friend, then as a sister, and more often than not he spoke as a faithful supplicant to a goddess that held him leashed with a starlight-forged chain of grace. John tried to cram a socio-political hot mess within a few phrases that barely made sense most of the time. Alexander understood that there existed a theological sovereignty of multiple queens, who owned the literal mandate of heaven given to them by themselves. Up until Selene broke some social taboo. Either something very bad happened under her, or she did something extremely bad herself. If human history could be applicable here, it did not matter which. And John obviously did not understand it. Alexander glanced at her slumbering form, her hair gently waving in an inexistent breeze. What kind of person was she, he wondered. How lonely had she been that John had wormed his way to her heart? What did she do that gentle people, like this white girl, could have wanted her dead? Had she earned it? Did she deserve it? Hide her, Alexander found himself saying. Her life must be worth more than any station she has. John's rambling abruptly ended. There's no need to. Where would I even hide her? Alexander vaguely nodded around them, the dark forest that John moved so easily and unafraid in. We are winning so far, John said. Are you? Alexander rhetorically asked. Those enemies of hers you have been describing. What exactly is the reason they want to hurt her? Political? Theological? Something else? It seems to me you're dealing with people who have an ideology. An ideology that something is wrong and needs to be removed, to be fixed. That kind of ideology doesn't become afraid just because you hurt some of them or imprison some of them. You don't win with violence, you just embolden them. They are basically gone. They haven't done shit in ages. Then you drove them to hiding. They're not going to stay like that forever. They've managed to do shit so far, John replied angrily. And all they need to do is succeed once, Alexander reprimanded him. John pointed at Alexander accusatorily. You think you'd have done better? Heavens help me, no, Alexander honestly replied. I wouldn't know where to begin. This would be police work. You'd have to interrogate people, find connections, evidence. What do I know of the skills and organization needed to uncover and unravel a conspiracy or a coup? So you'd be shit help is what you're saying. John sighed in disappointment. Ah, now Alexander understood why John had been so verbal on this matter. You expected me to help you. Help her. I thought that. I hoped that since you were stuck here you could at least offer a hand, John said sullenly. He wouldn't have. Not to John. I'm willing to wager I'm not going to be at liberty to choose how I spend my time for the foreseeable future. And Alexander wouldn't be stuck here either, if he could help it. John waved his hand. I'd be able to manage something. Community work, they might buy that. Or just annoy them into giving you to me. Like an unwanted puppy. It is pretty much how they treat prisoners here, John announced. Relief momentarily washed over Alexander. No cruel punishments then. Still, John continued, knowing what we miss is an asset. Between the two of us, we might be able to come up with something, right? He could never get the fucking message, could he? I'm not helping you come up with shit, he said, his feelings surfacing for a moment. What the fuck crawled up your ass? He didn't just fucking I don't know how this place works, its customs, its people, nothing. I'm not a detective and I'm in no mood to further endanger someone's life by playing at being one. She needs all the fucking help she can get. John growled. The last fucking help she needs is from you and I. Alexander growled back. I don't know what the people here are like, but I can't see that kind of connection flying well anywhere. Someone has to be on her side. Her own people have to be on her side. They're fucking not. Then fucking hide her somewhere until it all dies down. There's nowhere to hide her forever. John resentfully insisted. Even if we hid here or some place like it, sooner or later either someone would find out even if we managed to not get killed day after day. Alexander pulled back, reconsidering his tone. John cared for this starlet lady, true. But despite Alexander's own, ever-growing, disdain, this girl was not at fault. None of the people that fell for John were. You know where you could take her, Alexander finally said. Never. John almost growled like a maddened beast. I'm not taking her home from her. I'm not inflicting hell on her. Could John have been manipulating Alexander into offering the glimmering piece of information that John lacked? Perhaps. More than likely, if it was so, John saw his way in. He was a creature of opportunity, a master of grasping the advantage that would fleetingly appear in front of him. Alexander's pity would probably appear as such an advantage to him. One that Alexander couldn't allow himself to offer either way. I could tell you how to navigate the gates. John didn't move. He didn't even blink. Not like a statue, like a man who had just heard the sound of a door unlocking in his own head. Don't, he said. Alexander's mouth twitched. Not a smile. A reflex. Don't what? John's gloved hand tightened around the strap of his helmet, leather creaking against leather. He stared at the ground between them, as if eye contact might make the words real. Don't say it, he repeated, quieter. Don't explain it. Don't, he swallowed, jaw working like it hurt. Just don't. Alexander leaned forward an inch. Why? What are you afraid of? John's head snapped up then, and for a fraction of a second the old John was there raw, cornered, furious at being seen. "If you say another word," he said, voice flat with effort, "your men don't leave this forest." The threat landed wrong, too controlled to be rage, too steady to be a bluff. Alexander stared at him, trying to find the angle. "You're serious?" John's gaze flicked, fast, toward the sleeping blue Queen Selene and then away again like he'd burned his eyes on her. "I'm serious," he said. "Drop it." Alexander's tongue pressed against the inside of his teeth. He tasted blood where he'd bitten down without realizing. "Always the same," Alexander murmured. "Always choosing what is easier for you." John's answer came after a beat, and it wasn't an explanation. It was a boundary. "It's not," he said, and the words sounded like poison. Alexander stayed silent. He had expected John to want to know. To take the knowledge and abandon these people. And John believed that he would do so too. Alexander had to admit some respect for the restraint, to know that you want something so badly that you need to refuse knowing of it too. What if that was not it? Alexander watched the remains of his oldest friend. His face was hidden under that dirty mask when it wasn't under the helmet currently creaking in his anxious hands, but that didn't matter. What he said didn't matter. Those were never honest. No, John's honesty came from his hands, the tension in his shoulders, the choice of facing. John's gloved hand was still wrapped around the strap of his helmet, the leather creaking slowly. Not impatience, nor anger. Restraint. Like a pressure applied over a wound that kept trying to open. His shoulders were up, as if expecting blows. Alexander let the silence stretch, waiting to see if John would fill it or let it choke him. He did neither. He kept his eye fixed on the fire, no, the dirt between his feet, safer than facing Alexander or anyone else. "Don't," John had said. "Not I don't want to. Not I don't believe you. Just, don't." Alexander breathed through his nose, the smell of smoke tasting like iron and splintering wood. He could feel his own pulse behind his teeth and on his temple, striking at the tempo of the gate. "You don't want to know," Alexander said softly, testing the words like a sharpened blade against his skin, "because you already know enough." The reaction was instant. John's head snapped a fraction up too fast, too sharp, and then halted, like a predator catching itself before it showed teeth. The helmet strap tightened in his grip until the leather gave a loud squeal of protest. And his eyes, hidden under shadow, half swallowed by the night, flicked, quick as a spark, toward Selene. Not at Alexander. Not at the fire. Not at the people around them or the little dragon. At her. The sleeping blue queen lay just close at the warm light, hair shifting like a slow tide of stars, horn cracked, chest rising and falling with a calm that did not belong to the night they'd carved. John's gaze touched her and ripped away again like it hurt. Alexander felt something cold slide down the inside of his spine. That wasn't selfishness. That wasn't "I don't want to go home." That was fear of a concept. Fear of a truth being made solid. Fear that if Alexander said the next sentence, it would not be a sentence anymore. It would be a door. And a door can open. "I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about," John pronounced his puzzlement so perfectly that Alexander couldn't help but huff in amusement. Oh, he had been so close to believing he had been wrong. That John was what the young version of himself had believed him to be, that Alexander had never truly seen through him. He had known John as the large kid who would always cry when he hurt others in fights, but somehow always ended up in them. He had known him as the awkward teenager with the uncertain smile who nevertheless managed to spin himself to the center of attention. And then he had known him as the man, who claimed he became what fate turned him into. Alexander leaned forward a little. Not pleading. Not threatening. Just enough to make it clear this wasn't dead. "Afraid of the possibility, hey," Alexander said, exhaling. "You might be right to be." The leather strap creaked again. "There. A sliver of honesty. My oh my, how the tables had deliciously turned. Alexander might have been without a weapon, but not options, and the option he just uncovered would wreak absolute havoc upon John. Dangling it right under his nose, he was, and his friend was doing his damnedest to ignore it. To keep on pretending that it was the gates, the universe, were cruel. That they were chance. Because if he didn't, then all these long years, all that suffering, was not just pain inflicted on him. Then it would be pain he had brought, that he carried with him like a stink, a vile smoke drenched in his being. All Alexander had to do was say it and John's cosmology would shatter in an instant. The universe was not wounding him. John was the wound. Alexander felt a strange satisfaction at that. Vicious, yet fulfilling. But there was something else behind it, something like grief. Because it meant more, did it not? It meant that when Mary died alone, when Vivian was buried in the darkness, when the children tumbled into the dark with hands outstretched and tailing screams for the strangers to save them who could not, John had been dragging the pain behind him like a storm cloud. Not by malice. Not by design. By being what he was. Who he was. The little guilt-ridden boy who couldn't stop himself. Alexander's fingers twitched. He stupidly wanted something to grab, to throw it, to break it. To undo this moment and all the moments before. He didn't want to hate John. He didn't want to forgive him. He just wanted to leave him behind, to never think of him, to let the pain go. Alexander would never be John. He had promised himself. Not even in this. You're not afraid you'll leave, Alexander went on, slow. You're afraid you'll understand why you could. John's helmet strap gave one more creak, and then his hand went dead still, clamped tight enough that the leather stopped protesting. John's breathing came shallow under the armor. John looked again, that flick toward Selene. The sleeping curve of her shoulder. The slow wave of her hair. I don't want to be able to, he said, and Alexander knew what he meant even while John did not consciously, not in both ways. Alexander could have pushed. He could have finished it. He could have said the sentence he was now certain would break something open in John's mind, something that would never close again. And he wanted to. Heavens help him, how he wanted to. Wanted to watch John's face, not the ruined skin, but the expression when the truth hit. Wanted to see him flinch. Wanted to see him finally pay in a way pain never made him pay. No, Alexander had not left the old hate behind, it seemed. It rose up, bitter and intoxicating, and he wanted to drink his fill. He exhaled, hoping some of it would leave him. Alexander remembered, though, what it was like to be the reason children screamed. He could see Selene lying there, and unknown to him as she was, she did not deserve his anger. The little dragon child, so brave and resolute, did not either. And the young white lady, who so graciously extended mercy and care to him and his men, deserved far better. He let his verbal pistol remain unfired. I'm going to give you a different offer. Alexander's voice stayed calm. Almost professional. He pointed a thumb toward the darkness where his wounded lay. I need my people alive and returned to their home. You need her safety. John's gloved hand shifted, not tightening now, but adjusting, readying. Like a man preparing to refuse again. Alexander saw it and chose his words carefully. Come with us, Alexander said. With her. Trade what you both know about magic, about worlds you visited, any hints about the Enders for protection. For resources. For a chance to stop improvising safety with blood and luck. John's voice was low. And what do you get? I get you where I can see you, Alexander didn't lie. Not now. And perhaps I will see you mended. There are therapists. Psychiatrists. I'd see you under their care. That's what I'd get. Silence fell again, heavy as the cold around the campfires. John stared at him, the fire not reaching the darkness under his brow. For a moment Alexander couldn't tell if he was going to laugh, or lunge, or do nothing at all? Then John spoke, and the words were almost a whisper. And if I say yes? Do you promise you won't say it? Alexander watched his eyes flick, once more, toward Selene. Do you promise she will be safe? Alexander's chest tightened. He could destroy John with the truth. Alexander inclined his head, once. And if I asked, to be taken home after? Alexander questioned for a moment which one he meant. Yet it mattered not. He nodded, this time lying. I promise nothing, John said. Not yet. But I will think about it. End of, Hell is Where the Heartache Is.